right. Well, I think this is the second time you've been on the stream. Do you want to throw out who you are, where people can find you? And then I guess we
Yeah,
can hop
sure.
into our conversation.
Yeah, I think I came on, it must have been a year ago now, because I remember it was very hot then as well. Yeah, so my name is TheKavernacle, my YouTube name. Literally that's all I do, just YouTube, no Twitch or anything. And yeah, just make content on various political issues, pretty much whatever I feel like. Let me turn myself up a bit. Stuff I've been doing at the moment is like more history focused, but yeah, just generally, talk about American politics, talk about neo-Nazi stuff. Not so much about British politics, which I think is going to be the main focus of today's discussion. Not because I don't want to, but well, because I don't want to in some ways, but also YouTube has a really small ceiling for political content anyway. You don't want to reduce it even further by only talking about politics, that people don't really care about as well.
Well, I think you have well, people could find you, and it's TheKavernacle, right? Or am I mispronouncing it? Okay.
No, Tabernacle, just
Beautiful.
on everything basically.
Well, I'll try to get your thoughts on a lot of different areas, but obviously, in Turf Island, you have a lot, you have an exciting, labor uprising with I think it's the RMT strikes, the rail strikes.
Yeah.
And what is your kind of feeling about the mood of the country over, that labor action? And what is your thoughts on the left and, Keir Starmer? Just give an overview of what's going on and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. I don't know how far I want to go back, but okay. So Keir Starmer is the leader of the Labour Party, supposed human rights lawyer, which is a bit of a joke.
Nominal left party of the UK.
Yeah, the main left party, started by trade unionists about 120 years ago. Definitely fallen off since then. So yeah, Keir Starmer is like your Joe Biden style in terms of he thinks running as a politician without a personality or a massive agenda is somehow the way to win. And with Joe Biden, yeah, it might have worked to win, but once you get in power, it was like 75% of Democrats don't want him to run again. We basically have the same situation here, but it's more of a joke because the Labour Party is meant to be a left-wing party. So as you're just saying, there have been a lot of labour strikes, mainly rail strikes at the moment, but it looks like there's going to be a lot more, potentially nurses strikes, potentially teacher strikes, potentially post office strike, because inflation is so out of control, like it is in a lot of the world, but it's worse in the UK because of Brexit. And the pay increases that are being offered do not keep up with inflation, so therefore they're striking. The two prime ministers at the moment, or the two frontrunners for the new prime minister, are both saying they will ban striking, which is great as this country descends into fascism.
Isn't that? I mean, I'm pretty sure that the right to collective bargaining is in like the UN Charter and shit. Like, and there's multiple international agreements. That would be a violation of like quite a lot of human rights.
Well, they also said they want to get rid of the human rights bill that we follow, the European human rights bill. So they can change it and do what they want. And basically, over the last year, they've banned the right to protest. Obviously, people still protest, but it means judges can give you a massive sentence for relatively minor infractions, like maybe throwing a piece of fruit at a statue of Winston Churchill was an example cited that you could end up in jail for 10 years for now. So that's all going on. And just like in America, where we have this like ascendant right in the UK, the mainstream left just do not have an answer for it. So Keir Starmer fired one of his shadow cabinet members. So basically what happens in the UK is you have the government and the cabinet, and you have something called the shadow cabinet, which means if Labour won an election, they'd already have the positions filled for government. And also they are the main critics of the other position because you have an official opposition in the UK. Like it's literally called like Her Majesty's opposition. Like it's chosen as the majority party. And yeah, so one of them was fired yesterday for going on the picket line. Keir Starmer has said he will fire and sack people and take away the whip from people who go on the picket line. And isn't that meant to be the whole point of being in the Labour Party, which was founded by literal trade unionists? Ironically, Keir Starmer is actually named after the founder of the Labour Party, which makes it a bit more of a sick joke, to be honest.
What I don't understand, I gotta be honest, like even Democrats, don't It's not often that Democratic politicians go on active picket lines. It's like it's heard of, basically. It's not surprising. It's not necessarily super common. For example, in my state of Pennsylvania, there's a candidate running for the Senate named John Fetterman, and he's put like labor as his central, organized labor is his central reason for running. He frequently goes on picket lines and is on the side of striking workers. He's not just saying they have the right to strike and I support the right to strike. He's saying give them the raise, right? So, that's, to me, the idea that you would get in trouble for going on supporting a strike is absolutely insane. Especially for the Labor Party, which, as you rightly pointed out, was founded by trade unionists. How does this, I'm baffled. It's shocking. I mean, I have a low standard for the Labor Party, but this is like insane.
But I don't think you will be surprised if I say that if you understand what Joe Biden tried to do in 2020, they're trying to copy the blueprint. Like, they literally think to win an election, you have to court nationalistic, white, right-wing voters.
But didn't they lose? Didn't they lose in the? Sorry to interrupt, but it just makes no sense to me, because didn't they lose the voters in the so-called red wall, which are people that tend to be like trade unionists, or at least nominally aligned with that? Like, isn't that right? That tradesmen and stuff like that?
Yeah. But that shows what they think of them. They think because they're working class, they must be racist patriots. So therefore, that's what they care about most. And the reason they hated Jeremy Corbyn is because he wasn't a patriot. So now when Keir Starmer makes a speech on TV, he has 2 Union Jack flags behind him. And it's just like so overkill. But he's trying to act like you can be patriotic. And he's also like massively pro-business, barely ever talks about the workers and stuff like that. So yeah, you're right. While Labour did lose the red wall, it was mainly because of Brexit, because 2019, even though it wasn't about Brexit, it was essentially the Brexit election. It was
to get Boris Brexit Johnson done versus, and this is something that I said about Jeremy Corbyn is in 2015, he had a strong reason or was it 2015? Yeah, it was 2015 was Brexit. 17, right? Was that the Corbyn election that he overperformed?
Yeah, 2016 was Brexit, and 2017 was his first election. 2019 was his second election.
Yeah, in his first election, he massively overperformed expectations. He overperformed the polls. He was within a couple thousand votes of being prime minister. And then the entire British media, from the BBC to the right-wing, tabloids, to everyone, united in a personal destruction campaign. You had,
Have you heard about the Ford report, which came out recently?
I actually have heard of it. I haven't covered it on my stream yet.
So it's basically what you're saying. Yeah, it's basically saying what you're saying even more. It's not just the whole of the capitalist media apparatus and the other parties uniting against him. It was also his own party, and this new Ford report, which highlighted how anti-Semitism was weaponized against him. And, it made it seem like he wasn't taking it seriously when he was. Racism against Black Labour MPs by other MPs. And then it also showed that during 2017, they literally diverted funds from Corbyn-aligned Labour MPs to be in winnable seats against Tories to other MPs aligned with them who were in easily winnable seats. So they literally undermined his own chances of winning the election in 2017 and then completely turned against him in 2019. And the funniest part is Jeremy Corbyn's never liked the EU. They made him campaign on this compromise of we'll have another vote about it. And now the same people who made him compromise are now saying they want to make Brexit work. So it's just it's all just like a sick joke. And people have short memories in the UK, so they don't remember a lot of this stuff. But when you actually think about it, it's absolutely infuriating.
So yeah, and this is something that I've been talking about a lot, because the British Labour Party and the UK politics and American politics are very connected. This is something that people, obviously we share a common language, or we're separated by a common language, but we also have similar, pop culture. There's a constant cross-pollination, but at the highest levels, literally the same people work for, for example, Barack Obama's campaign manager worked for, Obama's re-election in 2012. And then he went to the UK and he worked for the Conservative Party to defeat the Labour Party, to defeat the left.
Yeah.
And that eventually led to the Brexit vote because David Cameron won on a promise to doing a referendum on the EU as a way of trying to mollify the far right in his own party. And then disastrously, the far right won over the Labour Party. And so all the establishment of both parties, of all the parties, I believe, except for the vote to leave party, everyone united to leave. Or to fight for remain, and they were defeated. David Cameron was taken down. So the Democrats are actually aligned with this conservative party. And so you have this elite class of politicians that are in the Democratic Party, that are in the Conservative Party, that are in the Parliamentary Labor Party, and they're against their own voters, basically.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Corbyn, now, the way it works in the UK, chat, just to give you some background, is they have formal parties. And to become part of the Labour Party, you have to pay dues. You don't just register as, like in America, our parties are very informal. And you can register as a Democrat, and it's free, and you can believe whatever the fuck you want. Whereas in the UK, there is actually like a formal party structure, and you pay dues to it. And so the activists of the Labour Party, the core, the dues-paying members, voted for Jeremy Corbyn to lead the Labour Party. But the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs, hated him, didn't want him. They were right-wingers. And the official party apparatus, the problem with Jeremy Corbyn, and this is a lesson we all have to learn. Sorry for monologuing, but it's very important. These people are our enemies. Any work we do with Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi is purely conditional. They are our enemy just as much as Donald Trump. And this is something that is very unpopular in American politics, especially online. There's this movement of people who call themselves like anarcho-Bidenists, anarcho-NATOists, who kind of ape like they're radical. But then when you're like, hey, we should fight within our own party to assert our wing, they're against it. They like shit on you and say you're Bernie or bust or something. And so the lesson to learn, and the reason why I got this long monologue is to close that out. In the UK, Jeremy Corbyn did not purge the centrists from the party. He left them in positions of power, and they used their positions of power to throw the election to the Conservative Party explicitly. They tried to lose. They used party resources that all those activists who voted for Jeremy Corbyn as leader gave them to defeat the candidates of their own leader. They were traitors. And that led to Brexit, that led to Boris Johnson, that led to the disaster. And now they seized power. And what are the centrists doing? Keir Starmer is purging the Labour Party of its own activists, of all of Jeremy Corbyn's supporters. He did something called take away the... Can you explain what they've done to Jeremy Corbyn? Sorry for monologuing. You're here. You're a guest, so I should ask you. What did they do to Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah, so basically he said that so basically there was this, it's like a human, I don't know what it's technically called. It's basically some sort of equalities commission in the UK, which is like quite in bed with the Tory government, doesn't give a shit about transphobia, stuff like that. They said something about the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and he said it was exaggerated, which this new report shows that it was. And then they took the whip away from him, meaning he is no longer in the Labour Party. Like, he sits in Parliament, but they can run a candidate against him in the next election. They probably wouldn't win because he's insanely popular. Like, he gets like 70% of the vote in his district and stuff. He's been an MP since like 1984 or something. But yeah, so basically he's not in the Labour Party anymore. And
so they kicked their former leader out, who got more votes than any Labour leader for decades in 2017, who was 2,000 votes short of becoming prime minister, and they have kicked him out of the party.
Yeah, and this was ages ago as well. It's like 2020.
And they smear anyone who is aligned with him, including like activists, normal voters.
Yeah, so there's a video going around. Type in Keir Starmer Liverpool if people are interested. A woman who I think she still is a member of the Labour Party. She just confronts him, and he just looks like a deer in the headlights because everything she's saying is true. Oh, okay, yeah, it's fucking funny. But it just sums it up. Like, that is basically the core of the Labour Party, and also the trade unions are putting out their funding as well. So like, you're literally siding with the Conservatives against us when you should be standing with us. And you know, the stuff they've been saying, like, they're against nationalization now for most things, even though
he ran on the idea of nationalizing utilities, nationalizing the rail. This is Keir Starmer we're talking about. And
people say, if you don't like him, then go vote for the Tories, as if we live in America. Not that makes sense anyway, but like there are multiple parties we can vote for here. So if I don't vote for the Labour Party, I'll just vote for someone else.
One of the lessons is, and one of the most frustrating things is that English speakers don't know a lot of languages. Because our language is the kind of language of commerce and aviation, and it dominates so much of the world. So many people learn English, so we don't learn other languages as much. And that's a real shame, because in France, their equivalent of the Labour Party, their equivalent of the Democratic Party died, and it split. And they have a left-wing leader, Mélenchon, starting a new thing, a new boldly progressive left-wing party. They have a disgusting centrist party, and they have far-right party and a conservative party. We need to do the same. There is no point. And this is my very unpopular opinion, because listen, in America we have the Electoral College, we have first past the post. Everything is incentivized to create these coalition parties so that you can win. But the reality is, these people hate us. They do not compromise with us. They do everything they can to defeat us. They try their best to defeat Democrats against Republicans, even with fascism. In America, a specter that's realistic. They're still doing the dirty tricks of trying to defeat popular progressive politicians in favor of even Republicans. Yeah. And I think the lesson of what's happened in the UK needs to be learned, and I fear that it's not being learned, and not enough people are talking about it.
That's praxis.
So what would you say? Like, what is your view of American politics? From across the pond, and what do you are you as pessimistic as I am? Or what do you see? Things that are positive. What's your kind of analysis?
Yeah, so I do follow American politics, and I have done for years, like fairly closely. It's a hard one, because I don't see Democrats winning the next general election. I don't see them winning the midterms. Joe Biden, it's the same in the UK. It's like I've been talking to a lot of people about this. It's like Joe Biden and Keir Starmer. Not that Keir Starmer's prime minister yet. They're two wrong people at the very wrong moment in time. When to stop this like creeping fascism in the UK, or this very explicit fascism in the US, you need someone to come in and do something to appease the masses and make their economic situations better, so they don't turn to fascism. They don't get whipped up into some sort of like nationalistic frenzy. But everyone hates Joe Biden. Democrats hate him broadly. All Republicans hate him. And it's just bizarre to me. And it probably shows how fundamentally he's been brainwashed by the system. You can be 80 years old, spent your whole career in politics. You finally get to the presidency. You can do stuff like federally legalize marijuana. Plenty of other things you can do. Cancel student debt. People would love you forever for doing just one of those things. But you don't do either of them. And you talk about stuff like the Senate parliamentarian, and you don't bully your own party to pass your bills. And it's like, why doesn't he do that? And it's like, in your head, if you're someone who sought the presidency for your whole life and you finally got there, and you got nothing to worry about afterwards, because it's likely you're not going to live into the next couple decades, then do something to be remembered by. But then again, he's so fundamentally brainwashed by the system, he's not doing anything. And then you have the whole, and it does frustrate me. I like the Squad enough, but the way they will not explicitly criticize Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi is extremely frustrating, because, like you were saying, they are the enemy too. Like, just because they're a bit nicer than Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, Nancy Pelosi's husband being one of the best traders in stocks is not because he's a genius. It's because she probably lets him in on some like legislation, and obviously all that stuff about stocks. So in my mind, I'm pessimistic because the Democrats are doing nothing. And even Gavin Newsom, who I don't like, but I thought he's going to run for president for years, he even said, like, on the Roe v. Wade thing, he's like, what are you even doing? Like, you're not doing anything. You're not saying anything against it. So Republicans own the conversation on abortion. They own the conversation on like trans rights and gay rights at the moment, because the Democrats just won't do anything. And the cynic in me now, like, I used to think this was stupid. It feels like they're perfectly happy to lose.
Oh no, they are for sure. They would rather lose with centrists than win with progressives. And this is not my personal opinion. You know, I was a Democratic politician in 2014. I won the Democratic nomination. I've had and run other campaigns, winning and losing, of progressive leftists and socialists. And every single time, my biggest opponent was always the Democratic Party. They were always, you know, trying to tear away organized labor. They always speak down about the electability and winnability of progressive candidates to all the organizations that are aligned with the left generally. They go out of their way to try to, like, don't put your, hey, Sierra Club, don't put your activists and organizers in that district because that guy's just not viable. Put it in my district, which is, you know, some disgusting centrist piece of shit who supports fracking, you know, like that is. And so what you have to do is you then have to spend your time and effort debunking your own party. And you can have all the evidence in the world. You can have amazing volunteers, tons of money that you've raised from grassroots people, and you have the strongest campaign, and you're constantly running into the headwind of the Democratic Party. And they leak like a sieve. They'll give your internal documents to the other side. Like, it's so bad. This horror stories I have is unbelievable, and this is personal experience. So everything that's happening to, you know, to Jeremy Corbyn, to me, doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, it's normal. If you're on the left, the centrists want you to lose more than the conservatives because they can work with them. They're largely aligned with them. Like Keir Starmer's policies on utilities and the Conservative Party's policies on utilities, we're talking about a pubic hair different. They're the same shit. You know, they want to rely on markets. And so for me, like, I think your analysis is dead on. And the thing that's really frustrating to me is the reason why somebody like AOC doesn't criticize Joe Biden is because they know that a lot of Americans are anti-voters, meaning they vote against the other side. They don't vote for things. They're so hopeless. They don't vote. They don't think like, I'm voting for Joe Biden to get student debt relief, as you rightly pointed out, right? They think I'm voting against Trump. So if you come in there and say Joe Biden is bad, they're saying you're helping Trump. And there's famously a candidate named Nina Turner. UK. Yeah, they say the thing with Nina Turner is a very famous leftist in America, and she ran for Congress in one of the most left-leaning districts in the country in Ohio, right? And they spent huge money quoting her because she said that when Joe Biden won the nomination, that him winning would be like eating half a shit sandwich, and Donald Trump winning would be like eating a full shit sandwich, right?
Yeah.
So what did they do? They spent millions of dollars replaying that clip. She's going to hurt Joe Biden. She's going to help the Republicans. She's not on your side. She's not a real Democrat. And she narrowly lost. So they're scared shitless of like people voting, you know, for, you know, because you're not a team player. And that's their entire plan is, yes, I don't offer you anything, but I'm better than Trump. If Trump wins, it's fascism. If Trump wins, blah.
Yeah. The thing is, I made a video in 2020 and it was called A Left-Wing Argument Against Voting Against Joe Biden. And like you're saying, it seemed quite bleak at the time in terms of you can say, well, if you don't vote for Biden, it's a vote for Trump. Or in the UK, it's like, if you don't vote for the Labour Party, it's a vote for the Tory Party. But my argument was, if you keep rewarding Democrats again and again for basically saying, fuck you, vote for me, then they're going to keep doing it forever. So next time it's going to be Joe Biden versus Ron DeSantis. And be like, well, you can't let that fascist in. Well, they did that last 2 times. And then what did you get for it? Like, I'm happy now people are saying like, I voted for you, now do something. Because that's the sentiment after Roe versus Wade I've seen a lot more is like, I did my thing for you and now you're not doing anything. So why do you deserve it?
Well, yeah, for me, like, listen, I don't give a shit about the Democratic Party and they don't give a shit about me. They hate me because I'm a left winger. You know, I have an axiom or a saying that I say called the Democratic Party hates their base. The Republican Party is scared of theirs. And you can understand every action that's taken based on that. And you're right about incentives because how do Democrats campaign? They campaign for the people that sometimes vote for Republicans.
Yeah.
That's who they orient to. And if you started voting for someone else, they're not going to orient toward the left necessarily. The only way you're going to get them is if you beat their asses. But understand that, like, you know, someone like Pete Buttigieg or somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, who's a congressman from New York, whose entire career is focused on destroying AOC. Those people are not your friends. And when they win, it's bad for you. You know, when Joe Biden won, that was bad for the left. It may have been the lesser of two evils, but he's going in there and he's spending his time punching left. He's going in there and he's setting up structures of power to push down on the left. And then he's going to be running for 8 fucking years, you know? Yeah. And then Kamala Harris will be the front runner, or one of his, you know, Pete Buttigieg. And so you're going to have, 12 years of a rightward lean of the party now because Joe Biden won. That was that's probably worse for the world than another 4 years of Trump, actually, at this point. At the time, I said the same as you. You have to vote Trump out. But they have done so little that I actually think that it may accelerate a rightward lurch for America, in the Supreme Court, and then when the Democrats lose the House, that's it for Joe Biden's presidency. He's not going to do anything for another, and that's, God knows what's going to happen from there.
Yeah, like I said, worst person at the worst time. Like, stat the Supreme Court, do all these things you can do to actually appeal to people to vote for you. But now, how many people are probably feeling, like a lot of left-wing people, apathetic about the future of the Democratic Party? Because it's like, well, I voted you in and the Republicans won anyway. They're not even a majority and they're doing everything they want because you're just completely useless.
Well, your point, like to talk about what, so the chat understands what we're talking about. Like, for example, the Democrats refuse to even attack the people that are supposedly destroying their agenda. One of the things that you'll notice is like Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin block some bill. That's the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party ran on it, right? That's the platform that Joe Biden won on, and they vote it down, right? And they lose. And it pisses off all these people. Joe Biden doesn't go out there and call up Kyrsten Sinema and say, hey, I'm going to support a primary. He doesn't say, when the Supreme Court throws out Roe v. Wade in a totally lawless decision, he doesn't say the Supreme Court is out of control. He says, I disagree with the decision, but I love the justices. Kyrsten Sinema is a great senator. There's no effort to, like, educate his own voters that there's a problem. And which has to leave you to the conclusion that everything that they're doing doesn't really bother him that much. He's not really opposed to it.
Yeah, it's just, and it's obviously like that rotating villain thing is if it's Sinema or Manchin killing a bill, it takes the heat off either one of them, and then they just keep switching around to never do anything. But yeah, like you're saying, like obviously everyone knows how Lyndon Johnson like works as a president, like absolute bully. But sometimes that's what people need. Or like you're saying, if he or FDI is like, if you care, go threaten them. Say, I'll back your primary opponent. I'll throw all the money behind them, and you'll never be in politics again. He has that power as someone who's like a veteran in the Democratic Party. But just like him and Pelosi, Pelosi back in like Henry Cuellar and after the Roe versus Wade thing leaked, and it's like these people do not give a shit. Like that they just know they can say fuck you and you'll vote for them, and that's what they're always banking on, is that the Republicans are so insane, them being a tiny bit less insane but having a fairly similar agenda in certain ways. It might work to win elections, but it doesn't work in the long term to stop fascism because Republicans are going to win, aren't they? So
like that's the thing. Like the idea that you can never lose another election as a strategy is absolutely batshit. You should be doing stuff to build institutions that could handle Trump winning. If the idea that Ron DeSantis wins and that's game over for our country, well, then it's going to be game over. Whether it's 4 years from now or 8 years from now or 15 years from now, the country's fucked. You can't win every single election. It's just not a strategy. And they're doing nothing to, they're basically allowing the risk to exist of that event. And the Republicans are favored to win the House. It's 50-50 for the Senate because the Democrats have very strong candidates in the Senate. The Republicans have very weak candidates in these swing states. So maybe they can buck the trend, But overall, Republicans are gaining power. And you had that short window of time to do stuff like protect voting rights, limit money in politics. They had all sorts of amazing bills that would have fundamentally restructured America that they didn't pass. And when you look at history, when you look at something like the 30s, America did not fall to fascism, not because Americans don't have a strong affinity for it. We do. We had fascist government in the South in Jim Crow. That's what it was. It was a racial caste system, pseudo-fascist government, or, much of Nazi ideology comes directly from American policy and practice. It's because we had a moment in time, which goes back to a very famous incident called the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in New York City, that led to local activists taking power in New York, progressives and socialists taking power in New York, passing what was the prototypical New Deal, and that led to the rise of a politician named FDR, who became governor of New York, and through basically luck, America got the best possible politician at the exact right time, which prevented fascism from winning. Yeah. We are now in the situation where we have the worst possible politician at the worst possible time. You know, we got very lucky in the 30s. We got very lucky in the 60s to get the people that we did. America is a very right-wing conservative constitution, and we have a very, very dangerous population of people that are very much aligned toward aggressive fascist tendencies. And it's been a fluke that we've got to where we are now. And unfortunately, the time to me is running out on this constitution.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you in terms of, you know, there's no strategy. Because the thing is, even in the best of times in politics, and even if you're like a decent enough president, there's going to be external global factors like a pandemic or a war, which is going to affect your rating and affect things out of your control. So like you're saying, the belief that you can just win elections forever to keep the fascists out is so stupid, especially like you're saying as well, if you don't put the mechanisms in place to stop people who might have tried to overthrow the US government from potentially running for president again, like Donald Trump. And it's like, it's like you're saying, it's such a bleak outlook for America, because unlike the UK, where I guess in the UK you have the nation state segmented a bit more, but I'm a bit more hopeful for the UK in general, even if we do have like a shitty Labour government in, mainly because despite the fascist leaning the new government has had, I feel like the population, I think the difference in the UK is religion, and I think that's a massive factor in US electoral politics. And it's not to say that, you know, I saw the polling that most Americans support like Roe v. Wade, but it's that thanks to Ronald Reagan, you have a highly energized evangelical and right-wing Catholic voting base, which are so powerful. And then you obviously have other things like Christian Zionists and AIPAC and stuff, which influence, you know, even with Democrats like Shontel Brown got massive AIPAC money to defeat Nina Turner and stuff. So it's like you're saying, I'm not hopeful in the UK, but the US, I'm very pessimistic about, just because I think when we last spoke, you were talking about the gerrymandering in Republican
states.
They didn't
stop any of it.
Yeah, and just there is no incentive for a Republican voter to vote for Joe Biden, because the Republicans have effectively made him the source of all their problems. Like, your gas prices are high, or that's Joe Biden. Wages not, or like corporations exploiting you, it's those woke corporations that are friends of the Democrats and shit like that. Republicans are good at waging a culture war, and of course Democrats have, you know, and leftists have always pushed back against it, but at the moment it feels like Joe Biden has just allowed them to have it all. Like, you can have your culture war, you can get your agenda passed, and then probably in 4 years, like 2 years time, you will own all branches of government, and probably, you know, like Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida, pass extremely anti-democratic measures to ensure that it'll be very hard for you to ever lose your majorities again. So yeah, I don't really, you know, if you're looking for someone who's someone who's optimistic about Western politics, I'm not the person to look at. But I will say the labor movements in the US have been, like, you know, they've been really cool to see. But I will just say that I think because the US is so behind, it might be too little too late. Where I feel like the UK Labour movement, I am more optimistic, because I feel like I'm seeing more and more people support it. And the typical propaganda of, well, you're selfish for striking, you know.
Oh, you're hurting the commuter. People just want to go to the beach.
Did you watch the Mick Lynch?
Yes.
And he just absolutely tearing the media apart. So I'm
was
happy.
Pathetic. That was fucking stupid. Yeah, I couldn't.
But I'm happy.
It.
I'm optimistic because at least there is, I think, a lot of support for that. Where in America, even if you did have support for that with the Democrats, there are just Republicans who are very important who will never change their mind, because things like abortion are the most important thing ever for them. And sadly, people like that are very influential in US politics. So yeah, sorry for Americans listening. I don't want to make you feel worse about yourself, but I'm very pessimistic.
I think one of the things that I find very interesting, and this is kind of a pivot to your most recent video, is you talked about kind of like anti-communism, and I want to recommend that everybody go check it out. It's called "The Nazis Were Victims of Communism: How Anti-Communism Sanitizes Fascism." And This is something that I've noticed is there's a lot of people who are online and they are creating kind of this, like, they have like an anti-communist perspective, and it seems like they talk more about it. Like, there's this phrase that's thrown around called tanky. Like, basically anybody who doesn't support the United States' foreign policy is like a tanky. You know, you deny the Holodomor and all sorts of other shit, and you know you're a simp for China. And it seems to be like there's these people that are nominally left, but they spend most of their time kind of like talking about anti-communism and allying themselves with what amount to fascists. So could you talk a little bit about what you covered in that video and give a pitch for why people should check it out? I might even watch it on the stream. I'm sorry I haven't yet, but
go for it. So I've this, like you're saying, there are people, I feel like it's an American leftist thing, or people self-described leftists who seem just to be liberals. Liberal. But basically I've always maintained, and it pisses people off, that anti-communism, not that you don't want to be a communist, not that you don't want a communist society and you're some sort of other leftist ideology or other political persuasion. Anti-communism has always been fundamentally racist, and carries water for fascism. What I mean by it is, if you believe in anti-communist as a political ideology, you would have to believe in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. You'd have to believe in fascist revisionist history about communist regimes. And the thing is, in the video, what I was trying to show is that a lot of this anti-communist rhetoric, regardless of what you think of communist regimes in history, that's not part of it, is inspired and often by people who did the Holocaust. Like in Canada, Croatians, Ukrainian communities like venerate these people who literally joined with the Nazis through the Holocaust because they fought the Soviet Union. And then that's what gets so frustrating, because I've been covering Ukrainian fascism for about 2 years, so before the war, and I get into lots of, like you said, people call me tanky, because I'm like, you know, as much as I support Ukrainian self-determination, I'm not going to pretend like Ukrainian fascism is not an issue just because Putin's pretending he cares about it. And people get very mad about it. They're like, oh, you're tanky Putin simp. And it's like, for me personally, if you know, I'm not simping for a nation state that is anti-communist and allies with fascists, as much as I support Ukrainians, you know, self-defense. So in the video, basically, I go through all of this and just talk about how being influenced by things like the Black Book of Communism, where it's like 100 million people killed by communism.
Made up, totally made up.
Yeah,
bullshit.
Made up. And even if that was true, even if 100 million people have been killed by communism, 100 million people plus have been killed by capitalism in the same time period, probably more.
9 million people starve to death every year. I think it's like are you? But that's not considered to be a Holodomor famine of capitalism. That's just the way things are, right? That's just the natural order. But,
well, that's why I end the video with Irish potato famine. Ireland was producing enough food, a surplus, to feed its entire population. Unlike like Western propaganda, they didn't just all sit around eating potatoes all day and then suddenly they couldn't. But then the British government had laissez-faire capitalism, free market capitalism, and they're like, well, the market will sort it out. But what did the market do? Keep exporting all the food to Britain and other colonies, and millions of Irish people starved to death or fled the country to America. And the population of Ireland has never actually got back to the levels it was in the mid-1800s. So do we ever say that's, you know, the Irish are victims of capitalism when they were? You know, Indians, were they victims of capitalism? But they were. So it's just this, you know, even
Chinese people, like, it's something that I talk about, is there was like constant famines in China every 5 to 10 years that killed 10 million people. And it wasn't until the Communist Party's development process completed that they stopped starving. Same thing with Russia.
Yeah.
You know, like there were constant famines in Russia. That's one of the reasons they had the Russian Revolution. And, you know, the Holodomor is a complicated, you know, I don't think the scholarly research shows that it was an intentional political famine. I think it was, you know, there's mismanagement. There was bad policy, bad agricultural policy. You know, there was all sorts of things to say that, yeah, people definitely starved there. And, it, you know, you could say incompetence, bad policy, mismanagement, whatever. But they ended starvation in the USSR as well. You know, and it's kind of ironic that these starvations, these famines, are used as arguments against communism when we have active famines happening right now in Yemen. The United States is supporting with our genocidal foreign policy. We are sanctioning, you know, speaking about foreign policy is, people talk about how, we can't control inflation. It's just so bad. But we actually did create it by doing a few things like sanctioning Venezuela, sanctioning Iran. We signed the Iran nuclear deal, and then the United States withdrew and then put sanctions on Iran. And Iran has a lot of oil available. How could we replace, Russian oil? Why is Venezuela, the largest source of oil, largest reserves of the world, not allowed to sell their oil? It's because the United States is trying to do regime change because we want to steal their resources. And so we've created this inflation with our foreign policy. Yeah,
and it's just, I like what you said about certain people, on the left being anti-communist, and I wouldn't even say necessarily they even think they are, but I think Western exceptionism, American exceptionism, and fundamental anti-communist brainwashing, even what you just said about the Soviet Union, people will call you a tanky for it.
Oh, I know they will, but that's just a fact. Those are just facts.
But that's what I mean. In my live stream last night, I said Vietnam is infinitely better off under a communist ruling than it was under the South Vietnamese government and capitalism. Same with Cuba. And if you look at the success, and
they've been sanctioned and mistreated.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at the success of China and the Soviet Union, it's not to say I fundamentally agree with everything they did ever, but if you look at like standards, basic standards of living, like education, access to food, housing, things like that, it's not a stretch to say that they were better under communist governments. We can talk, of course, about the flaws. I say in my video, I'm not like a simp for Stalin or some shit like that, but to reject everything good that these states did and not even see it as something that we could, in America, was it like BlackRock are buying up all the housing and stuff? If you compare that to like Soviet housing programs, am I going to say the American capitalist model is better or something like that? So it's just like, in my opinion, and even you were touching on that, is that what they call themselves, something NATO or whatever the fuck it was,
anarcho-NATOists and anarcho-Bidenists.
I think the Ukraine stuff really like shattered a lot of my faith in the online left, because I made a video basically saying I still don't like NATO, and people were just absolutely like getting me for it. And I'm like, as an anti-capitalist,
they literally exterminated leftists. If you consider yourself a leftist, NATO has exterminated people
Gladios.
Like Gladio, what we did in Indonesia, what we've done in Latin America, what we've done in Europe and Italy in particular. I think it's called the time of the bullet or something like that in Italy, where they
Greece,
specifically,
Italy.
like the interventions in Greece, absolutely in favor of right-wing dictatorship. I mean, there are so many things that if you're a leftist and you support NATO, either you are not a leftist and you're an actual op, or you are fucking stupid and you haven't read a history book, because they want to kill you.
Yeah, and
if you don't recognize that, you're dead wrong.
Yeah, and my problem is, are people so unimaginative? Like I said this, I said I can take, if we're talking about the 2022 context, I can take that maybe European states aligning themselves to defend against Russia makes sense to me. Like, that's something I understand.
Of course, yes.
The alliance being headed by the United States makes absolutely no sense. If Russia can't even handle Ukraine, how could it handle Western Europe, which also has nuclear weapons? Why do we even need America, where America then pressure other countries like Norway, Denmark, and others to go along with interventions in Libya or Afghanistan or Iraq? Doesn't seem like defending themselves against Russia if you're forcing Scandinavian countries on the border or in close proximity to Russia to go thousands of miles away to kill Central Asian peasants. Like, do people not see the fundamental flaw of the US being the strongest power in that they can coerce people to do other things? And that's why, like, it's just the whole thing with, anti-communism, fascism. Even like Zelensky's wife was at a Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation getting an award the other day. And it's like, yeah, you can respect Zelensky as a guy who didn't run because you expect most politicians to run in the face of invasion. You can support the Ukrainian defense and, don't want Ukraine to be occupied by different countries.
Putin is a right-winger. This is the other thing that's crazy to me is Putin is a right-winger that we created. We intervened in Russia, and we supported Yeltsin to stop the Communist Party from winning the election.
For sure.
We put actual money, the actual CIA, actual interference within Russia's elections. We interfered in elections in Russia. and then he handed power directly to Putin. And why is modern Russia like the way it is? Because we orchestrated them selling off state assets, selling off state property. We did a laissez-faire shock doctrine. It destroyed the standard of living of Russians. It destroyed their economy. It put them in debt. They were a pathetic. They went from a world superpower with a strong economy, second largest economy in the world, to a debtor nation that was ruled by oligarchs, and the average life expectancy dropped 15 years, and people lost everything.
It was like 50% unemployment or something at the time. Absolutely crazy.
And they've turned to right-wing fascism, and he has done it by creating a petro-state. And so Putin is the direct result of our own policy. So this invasion of Ukraine is blowback. This is just advanced blowback. And if you say that, they're saying, oh, you're blaming the United States for Putin's aggression. It's like, well, Putin is where he is because of our interventions. You can trace the line. Just like when September 11th happened, you can trace the line from our interventions in Afghanistan, our support of the Mujahideen, all the way to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and, our support of the Saudi royal family. All that blowback is from our intervention. And it's not to blame the United States. It's just to do basic historical analysis. And so for sure. So what do you think we should do going forward? Because like I think the invasion of Ukraine, with Russia, Russia cutting off or lowering gas supplies, you're in Europe. And
it's insane. It's insane. The price spikes are absolutely crazy. They're going to be insane in the winter as well.
Yeah.
So
like, are you concerned about like your own availability of energy there in the UK, or are you guys insulated from it because of your North Sea production, or like what's the situation if the worst happens?
So I think France's energy producer is owned by the state, and they literally forced them to be like take a massive loss on their profits recently. Where in the UK, it's not the case, and it's looking really bleak for the winter. Thankfully, personally, I'm living in Vietnam for the winter, so it's not going to affect me as much. But obviously, I've got family and friends. Yeah, just because I lived in Spain for 3 months this year and I'm going to live in Vietnam, just might as well because I'm a YouTuber. But also, it's just like, that's what I was saying a lot during the coverage. I'm like, there's going to be a window of massive support for the war, but European countries, and you probably see it with how France and Germany are tackling this, they're going to quickly think, oh shit, like we get so much of our gas and some oil from Russia. This war is not going to be a good thing for us. And then I'm really scared because the cost of living is so crazy. Not scared, but the cost of living is so crazy. Obviously, the shitty thing is people are going to actually die from freezing to death in the winter. But I'm hoping it will provoke some more industrial action and more like protests and stuff, because this country is very docile when it comes to those things, and it has been for like over 100 years, I'd say, at this point. So I'm hoping it will create people to help people realize about like the problems we have. But then the support for the Ukraine war, I think, will go down like massively. And I always say this about Americans in America: it's very easy to be in a country that is, or in theory can be, quite self-reliant on a lot of its energy, because Canadian oil or American oil and even food production. But when you have other countries that are so interconnected with the Russian government and stuff, like our one, it's very hard to be as gung-ho about it. And we face the direct consequences of all of this stuff. Same with the Ukrainians and everything. So the problem is globalized capitalism is so fragile that one war between two countries that aren't even the most powerful just fucks our whole economy. Like, where does most of our wheat come from? Russia and Ukraine. Where does loads of gas and oil come from? Russia and Ukraine. So I think it should, not that I'm necessarily against globalization, but I think it should prompt countries to look at their own energy security. And like you're saying, wouldn't it be handy if Venezuela and Iran weren't under sanctions right now, because there's so much oil there?
What's the justification for that at this point? Like, the justification is nil, other than American optional foreign policy. It's our domination of your politics. Like, you can't tell me that
Venezuela's insane. Like,
Venezuela represents a threat to the European Union.
Yeah.
Or even to its own people when compared to, like, say, I don't know, Saudi Arabia. Or even China.
Israel,
like,
Arabia,
it's comical that, China is America's top trading partner, and it's like, you're telling me that Venezuela is more repressive to their population than China is? That's batshit crazy, man.
Well, it's all about politics. That's what I mentioned in the video as well. There's a really cynical American, like, political pandering is, I must fuck over Cuba and Venezuela in the hopes that far-right Latinos will vote for me. And now with Florida, I don't know how it's looking, but in my mind, it doesn't even look like Florida is going to be a swing state anymore.
No.
So what is the justification of Joe Biden continuing? I know he's reversed some of it lately, but basically continuing Trump's policies on Cuba and Venezuela. Like, what is the point? Like, they're not going to fucking vote for you. They think you're a communist.
Like, what do you like? The thing that's funny is, like, do you think more people would vote for you if gas is $6 a gallon and they can't afford to heat their home, or you have relations with Venezuela, which nobody fucking cares about in America? That's the thing. Nobody cares about the. You're right to point to like a small group of exiles in Florida, and the reality is most of those people are far right wingers who vote Republican and always have. So you're not actually making a play for those people, and yet we maintain these sanctions, and what we're doing is putting a gun to our own head. We're giving Russia more leverage. If you cared about. If you really wanted to defeat Russia, if that was an actual priority and it wasn't just funding these military-industrial complex, wouldn't you want to just massively increase the supply of oil available from places like Iran and Venezuela?
Yeah.
And that would actually harm the Russian economy. They're winning because oil prices are going up, and they just turned around and sold to India and China.
And also Saudi Arabia, our great allies, are like, yeah, fuck you. Like, beg for oil, but we won't help you. Like, it's crazy how powerful America is, but then how, like you were saying, they both create their own enemies, and just it's so fragile that they cannot coerce these countries to even do what it wants sometimes. Like,
that's because our political class is not operating on behalf of the American nation state and the interests of Americans. It's operating on the behalf of these the capitalists. Like, there's these capitalist accretions of power, like Wall Street or oil and gas companies, or our military industrial complex, who have outsized control on our politics. And for Iran, that would be AIPAC, Israeli foreign interference in our election money.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're pursuing these policies that are actually not in the interests of Americans, or not in the interests of the world, but are only narrowly benefit this certain class of people, and they benefit tremendously. So their benefits are so concentrated that it's profitable for them.
Yeah, and I guess that's the main thing, isn't it? It's like the US has a lot of natural resources. The problem is they're all owned by private corporations who sell it off. And it's like, if Joe Biden wanted to nationalize certain things, or even partly certain things, then it would massively help. But then it's just, I guess Joe Biden's just this brainwashed person who thinks the power of the presidency is not something to be used. Unlike Donald Trump, who wanted to act like a king.
If you can't. They believe in this idea of, like, you don't want to be a hypocrite. If you show how much you're restrained you are, then people will respect the institution. And the thing is this ratchet effect. These are all things that are well known and understood. But, like, Biden has kept largely most of Trump's immigration policy. Biden has largely continued Trump's energy policy. And there's been very little in the way of a change of the things that people said were dire. Like, we haven't passed an immigration bill. There hasn't been any. So we have this continual underclass of people that work in America that have no legal status. And the Democrats have run on, we're going to fix immigration for decades. And they didn't even attempt an immigration bill.
Yeah.
And so we have these long-standing structural problems. And Joe Biden is kind of just standing around wasting time until the next Republican takes office.
Yeah, and like with even the filibuster, the Republicans will get rid of that in 2 seconds.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, what the fuck are you waiting for? Like, and even the Supreme Court, it's like, well, if you start packing it and then they start packing it, well, at least you have a couple years of it being packed on your side, rather than it just being on their side forever.
It's like, oh no, if you pack the Supreme Court, the Republicans will. They already did.
Yeah,
it's like if you slap him back, he'll slap you, and it's like he already did.
It's just, yeah, I get so like depressed, not really depressed, but like I was thinking about this late last night, and I was like, politics is so simple. Like, there's lots of complicated parts to it, but certain bits are so simple. And how depressing is it? Like, so many people can see it, but we're just so powerless because of, obviously things like capitalism, to enact any change and, see rational sense. We just have to watch people like Joe Biden give a speech about why something is so bad and then act like it's our fault or Americans' fault, and then they got to go vote for them again. Like literally, that's the Biden presidency in a nutshell. Say it's bad, then be like, go vote for us in November. I'll go walk off, and it's just so depressing.
Well, yeah, it's like I try to apply a Marxian analysis or materialist analysis to these things, and like when I examine these institutions, the Democratic Party makes perfect sense to me. When it was reformed around the idea of we have to take corporate money to compete with the Republicans' corporate money, and that was basically Bill Clinton's Democratic Leadership Conference argument, which is we should reorient it towards a pro-business position because of the weakening power of organized labor. They can't support our coalition. We need some of that corporate money. It's now created an incentive structure where a large portion of these politicians literally don't want the Democratic Party's agenda to pass. So they go in there and they only want to have very narrow, for example, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin don't want to see more Democrats win because they oppose the policies. Whereas Republicans, on the other hand, every Republican wants to see more Republicans winning. Democrats right now, for example, could admit DC as a state and get 2 more Democrats. You only need to pass a law. There's 700,000 Americans who don't have a vote in Congress on the continental United States. We have millions of Americans in Puerto Rico who either should have independence or, if they elect, have statehood, or while they remain as a part of a possession of the United States, they should be treated as a state. And if they decide to leave, they should be able to leave. There's this opportunity to restructure things. California could divide itself up to 7 states if it wanted, or 10, or 50. That's all within the power of the Constitution. That's all within the 4 corners of the document. And the thing is, the Republicans play constitutional hardball, and the Democrats don't even use the powers that they clearly have.
Yeah, and it's just, but that's what I mean. It's the worst people, old 80-year-old people who grew up in the era of, Gerald Ford, where you'd get on with your Republican colleagues and shit like that. And then they don't really realize that, Republicans will do anything they can to win. And that's politics in a nutshell. But it feels like Democrats, the only thing they'll do to win now is the other guy is bad. And then it's just, like you're saying, there's so many different steps to take to ensure at least a fair playing field. And there's so many options available. But then it's just because we have dinosaurs in the highest levels of politics who think, or I think also, I don't know if there's a term for this, but I think like a capitalist society conditions you to not imagine anything beyond
capitalist
what you have
realism.
Already. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's this like the world is like this, America is like this, and it will never change. And it basically can't change. And if you think it should, you're crazy. But like you're saying, just have a bit of an imagination. And even with the DC thing doesn't even seem like that controversial. But like to them, it's like, oh no, way.
But they don't like. Why doesn't Manchin support that? It's blatantly undemocratic. I mean, it wouldn't even be the smallest state. There's 2 states that would have lower population than DC if it was a state. So what exactly is the logic here? Alaska, I think, had 100,000 people when it became a state. This is just, or 500,000. This is just common sense, and it's totally legal. And it just takes a simple majority, and then you have 2 more senators. The reason why America has North Dakota and South Dakota is because the Republican Party divided the Dakota territory so they'd get more Republicans. Yeah. that was literally why we have that. And yet the Democrats do not even play ball. They don't pass any voting rights bills. They don't use the powers that they have to defend and reinforce the democracy. And so you have to conclude that a large segment of the Democratic Party literally don't want to see the Democratic Party succeed. And that is a situation that, like when, the centrists in the UK were trying to lose, they're going to succeed. A traitor is more of a threat than an enemy because you don't see them coming. And you can't prepare against them. And so, I criticized Pete Buttigieg because I said he was one of the worst. He's the worst transportation secretary we've had in 60 years. And it's not because I like Elaine Chao or some sort of like Republican Department of Transportation secretary. It's the facts on the ground. We have a supply chain crisis. We don't have, we have a crisis in airports with, massive cancellations and baggage delays. And we have a railway workers on the verge of striking. Like literally land, air, and sea is collapsing.
Yeah.
And he's doing nothing. And they say, well, what should he do? And it's like, I have a million things he can do. You lack.
That's
so
the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and to get to your point, they lack imagination. And if you say someone is doing bad, their argument is, well, what you know, he can't do anything. He can't fix anything. How dare you question the facts?
Yeah.
And
also,
how do you deal with that? How do you not go insane? I'm losing it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just like.
Well, also the worst thing about that as well is it's a twofold thing. He knew that no one would scrutinize that position, and it's clear that Joe Biden gave him that position so he'd drop out of the primary.
Yes, it was a bribe.
He was beating him.
He's unqualified. He's blatantly unqualified for it.
But now he's saying, well, you know, I was in the government. I have experience now. I'm not just some one-time mayor. I was in the Biden administration. And then when I run for president, I can say that. And because no one gives a shit like about
his results,
like transportation, the media are on his case. No one gives a shit. And when he says, as transportation secretary, we did X, Y, and Z, and everyone was like, oh, that was
spent
great.
$1 billion studying racial equity of highways. You're a racist if you don't think that that was not significant. That's literally what I've seen. And it's like, you know, listen, highways have been built in a racially discriminatory manner. That's true. They have gone through poor black communities. That's a historical thing that happens in America. But when you talk about, I can't fly on a plane or ride a train or get something delivered that I ordered, that's his basic fundamental job, and he's failed. And there's no connection to competence anymore. This is the fundamental failure of our politics that I don't see a way out of, because people literally don't care about the results. That's a corrupt system.
It's liberal politics, isn't it? In a nutshell, it's all about image. It's even like I tweeted about that Zelensky and his wife being in Vogue the other day, and I was like, I understand why they're doing this, because liberals will absolutely eat this shit up, like him and his wife in Vogue. And it's like same with Pete Buttigieg. It's literally just an image thing. Like, people don't know what he stands for, but because he comes across, you know, young and fairly competent, apparently he's like a front runner now for the next, like, the presidential nomination.
But competent in what? Like, and this is where I feel like this is where I feel disconnected from my fellow Americans, because, like, I guess I'm insane in that I sense of, like, I want to see actual material improvement of my living conditions, and those, you know, and we have more student debt than ever. Housing prices are skyrocketing and even more unaffordable than ever. We haven't raised the minimum wage since 2009. You know, we have a recession now with 2 quarters of negative growth. We have record-breaking inflation. It's a failed presidency.
Yeah.
And that's just, and if you say that, you are like, just saying that makes me like Trump for some reason. And I don't know how to deal with that. Like, I don't think my mind can align with, like, you know, the aestheticization of politics is which one of the chatters is saying. And I think that hits it the nail right on the head.
It's the same in the UK, though. That's what's so frustrating. It's like, if you don't want to vote for Keir Starmer and get the Tories out, then you would like to vote for the Tories. And it's like, give me something to vote for, and don't just constantly say fuck you and punch down the left and then act like I should reward you for it because the other guy is worse. Because that's not, the thing is, obviously that's how politics should work. It's not how politics does work because of this aesthetic shit. Like, oh, he like comes across well, so I like that guy. And it's kind of like Boris Johnson in a nutshell as well. Like, people liked him for no other reason apart from he's a fucking clown. And he came across as like not your average politician. It's same with Donald Trump. It's like, people liked him because he didn't seem like your average politician. So there's some sort of image thing going on there. And it's just frustrating. And obviously there's so many problems with this. Like, we could talk about it like all day in terms of the media's responsibility for this, and just how people are brainwashed to see like a certain, you know, you talk about John Fetterman. I'm sure the Republicans are running ads against him talking about how he dresses or something. It happened to Jeremy Corbyn as well, because he dresses in like shorts and a hoodie. I've seen him going around in. Jeremy Corbyn used to wear like a brown suit with no tie, and it's just this aesthetic shit. And it all comes from the liberal, moderate conservative class who create image politics, really. And it's just, you know, how do we get out of that? It's just really hard.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point to end on. And thanks so much for coming on, because
thanks for having me.
I love having, and everybody please go and follow TheKavernacle if you haven't already, and watch that anti-communist video, because I think that's I think one of the biggest things about politics online is there's so many people that are disconnected from the function of politics or the purpose of it. And it's turned into kind of an aestheticization of politics, the obsession with optics, the obsession with like entertainment and spectacle, and less so much about what it's really for, which is a vying for resources. It is about building a working class movement and fighting against our ideological enemies and solidarity. And I think your channel is a perfect example of what I want to see, which is that kind of politics. So thanks so much for coming on, and keep fighting the good fight. And hopefully we can overcome the shitters that are absolutely worthless that suck up so much of the energy of this all the online left.
Thanks so much for having me on, and the nice words and stuff. And just stay, people should try and stay away from meaningless Twitch debate drama and like these 21-year-olds who just go on massive panels debating stuff with, I don't know, conservatives and shit like that. Just focus on the real political stuff. And I guess that's everything. Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed our chat.
And is there anything else that you're going to be putting out soon that you want to promote, or you have a Patreon or anything like that people can sign up to help support you?
If you guys, because if you're basically new to my content, just go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you like it, then you can decide to follow my other socials, Patreon, all that good stuff. I live stream 2 times a week, done for the week now. And in terms of videos, I just make whatever I want to. So there'll be a video tonight and tomorrow, and then plenty more. But I mix it up. So today we're talking about like just Grand Theft Autos, like general anti-capitalist message, and then we're talking more about Jordan Peterson tomorrow. So I'm not always focusing on very like deep political concepts, but because I upload so much, I hope there's something for everyone there. But thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for tuning into this chat as well.
Thanks for coming on for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. Have a good day, bud. And hope to see you again.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, see ya. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap.